Family pressured me to give my bully sister a kidney transplant. The medical tests revealed a 20-year family secret about my real dad. Hey everyone, I'm Amanda, and I have a story that will blow your mind about family secrets, medical testing, and how sometimes the worst situations can reveal the truth you never knew you needed. This is about my sister who made my childhood hell, a kidney transplant that my family demanded I provide, and a paternity secret that changed my entire understanding of who I am. Let me start by painting you a picture of my family dynamic growing up. I'm 28 now, and my sister Claire is 2 years older. From the moment I could walk and talk, Claire made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. I'm not talking about normal sibling rivalry here. I'm talking about systematic, cruel bullying that went on for years. Claire was always the golden child in our family. She was popular, outgoing, got decent grades without much effort, and had this magnetic personality that drew people to her. My parents, especially my dad Robert, absolutely adored her. She could do no wrong in their eyes. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, bookish kid who preferred reading to parties, who got straight A's but was considered antisocial because I didn't have a huge group of friends. The bullying started when I was about 7 years old. Claire would accidentally break my toys, tell me I was adopted and that's why I looked different from the family, lock me out of the house when our parents weren't home, and convince her friends to exclude me from everything. She had this way of making it look like accidents or misunderstandings when our parents were around. But when we were alone, she was absolutely vicious. The worst part was that when I tried to tell my parents what was happening, they never believed me. Claire was such a good actress, she'd cry and say I was lying, that I was jealous of her friends, that I was trying to get her in trouble because I couldn't handle that she was more popular than me. My dad would always take her side, telling me I needed to stop being so sensitive and try to be more like Claire. The bullying continued through high school, where Claire made sure I was excluded from social events, spread rumors about me, and generally made my teenage years miserable. The final straw came when I was 17 and had my first serious boyfriend, Jake. We'd been dating for about 6 months, and I was really falling for him. Claire decided she wanted him, so she seduced him at a party when I wasn't there. They started dating behind my back for weeks before I found out. When I confronted Jake, he said that Claire had told him I was planning to break up with him anyway, and that I'd said I thought he was boring. Complete lies, of course, but Jake believed her. Claire got the boyfriend, I got my heart broken, and once again, my parents took her side. They said it wasn't Claire's fault that Jake chose her, and that I should be happy for my sister. After that, I basically gave up on having any kind of relationship with Claire. I went to college across the country, got my degree in computer science, and built a life for myself far away from my toxic family. I came home for major holidays, but I kept my visits short and my interactions with Claire to an absolute minimum. For about 6 years, I had peace. I had a good job, a nice apartment, a boyfriend named David who actually respected me, and friends who valued me for who I was. I thought I'd successfully escaped the dysfunction of my childhood family dynamics. Then, last year, I got the phone call that changed everything. My mom called me crying to tell me that Claire had been diagnosed with end-stage kidney disease. Apparently, she'd been having health problems for months but hadn't told anyone how serious it was. By the time she finally went to the doctor, her kidneys were barely functioning at all. My mom explained that Claire needed a kidney transplant to survive, and that the waiting list for donor kidneys was years long. She said the doctors had explained that the best chance for a successful transplant was to find a living donor from Claire's family, preferably a sibling. I felt terrible hearing that Claire was so sick, despite everything she'd put me through. I wouldn't wish kidney failure on anyone. But when my mom started hinting that I should get tested to see if I was a compatible donor, I was honestly conflicted. On one hand, this was a life or death situation, and Claire was still my sister, despite our horrible relationship. On the other hand, Claire had spent 26 years making my life hell, had never once apologized for any of it, and our parents had never acknowledged how badly she treated me. I told my mom I needed time to think about it. That's when the pressure campaign started. My parents called me multiple times a day. My aunts and uncles started reaching out, telling me what a good sister I should be. My dad sent me long emails about family loyalty and how disappointed he was that I wasn't immediately volunteering to save Claire's life. The guilt tripping was intense. They made me feel like I was a monster for not immediately jumping to donate my kidney. They said things like, "She's your only sister and family comes first, and how can you be so selfish when she's dying?" But here's what really got to me. Not once during this pressure campaign did anyone acknowledge the years of abuse I'd suffered from Claire. Not once did anyone say, "I know she wasn't always nice to you, or we're sorry we didn't protect you when you were kids." It was like my childhood trauma didn't matter at all compared to Claire's current medical crisis. The breaking point came when my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. He'd flown across the country just to guilt me in person. He sat in my living room and told me that if I didn't get tested, and if Claire died because there wasn't a donor, he would never forgive me. He said I'd have to live with her death on my conscience for the rest of my life. That conversation broke something in me. Here was the man who dismissed my pain for years, who'd never protected me from Claire's cruelty, who'd always made me feel like the problem child, telling me that I was responsible for saving the golden child who'd made my life miserable. But I also realized that the pressure wasn't going to stop. My family was going to make my life hell until I got tested. So, I decided to do it not because I wanted to donate, but because I wanted to shut them up. I figured I'd get tested, probably not be a match anyway, and then they'd have to leave me alone and find another solution. So I scheduled an appointment at the transplant center and went through the initial testing. They took blood samples, did medical history interviews, psychological evaluations, the whole process. The transplant coordinator explained that they need to do extensive testing to determine compatibility, and that even if I was a match, I'd have the right to back out at any time. A week later, I got a call asking me to come in to discuss the test results. I figured they were going to tell me I wasn't a match and that would be the end of it. Instead, the doctor sat me down and said something that turned my world upside down. "Amanda," she said, "we've run your blood work several times, and there's something we need to discuss. Based on your genetic markers, it's impossible for you to be Claire's biological sister." I stared at her, not understanding what she was saying. She explained that siblings share certain genetic markers that make them compatible for organ donation, but my blood work showed that Claire and I shared no genetic material at all. Not only could I not donate a kidney to her, but we weren't biologically related. My first thought was that there must be some mistake. Maybe they'd mixed up my blood samples or something, but the doctor assured me they'd triple-checked everything. She then gently suggested that there might be something about my family history that I wasn't aware of. I left that appointment in complete shock. My mind was racing with possibilities. Was I adopted and my parents never told me? Had there been some kind of mix-up at the hospital when I was born? Or was there something else going on that I'd never suspected? I couldn't bring myself to call my parents immediately. I needed time to process this information. I kept thinking about all the times Claire had told me I was adopted as a cruel joke, and how my parents had always dismissed it as sibling teasing. What if it hadn't been teasing at all? What if Claire had somehow known something I didn't? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that adoption didn't make sense either. I had clear memories of my mom being pregnant with me, family photos from when I was a newborn, all the normal stuff. If I'd been adopted, there would have been some kind of paper trail or family story about it. That's when another possibility occurred to me, one that made my stomach drop. What if I wasn't my father's biological daughter? I started thinking about my childhood with fresh eyes. I'd always been told I looked different from the rest of the family. Claire and my dad both had dark hair and brown eyes, while I had lighter hair and green eyes. My mom had medium brown hair and hazel eyes, so I'd always assumed I'd gotten my coloring from some combination of her genes and maybe some recessive traits from my dad's side, but now I was wondering if there was a different explanation entirely. I spent 3 days agonizing over whether to confront my parents with this information. Finally, I decided I couldn't live with not knowing the truth. I called my mom and told her I needed to talk to both her and my dad about something important. Regarding the kidney donation, when I got home the first time I'd been back in over a year, the atmosphere was tense. My parents were clearly expecting me to tell them I was going to donate to Claire. Instead, I sat them down and told them what the doctors had discovered. The blood tests show that Claire and I aren't biological siblings, I said. I need you to tell me the truth about my paternity. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom went completely pale, and my dad looked confused and angry. He started demanding to know what I was talking about, saying the doctors must have made a mistake, that this was impossible, but my mom's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She started crying, not sad crying, but the kind of crying that comes with being caught in a lie you've been keeping for decades. Finally, through her tears, my mom told me the truth. When Claire was 2 years old, my mom had gone through a rough patch in her marriage with my dad. They'd separated for about 6 months, and during that time, my mom had gotten involved with another man, someone she'd known from college who was in town for work. The relationship didn't last long, but my mom got pregnant. When she and my dad reconciled, she was already 2 months along. She told my dad the baby was his, and he never questioned it. I was born, and everyone just assumed I was Robert's daughter because that's what my mom had told them, my mom said. She'd convinced herself over the years that it didn't matter, that Robert had raised me as his own daughter and that made him my real father regardless of biology. She said she'd planned to take the secret to her grave. My dad's reaction was explosive. He started screaming at my mom, asking how she could have lied to him for 28 years. He was furious that he'd raised another man's child without knowing it. But then he turned on me, and that's when I saw the truth about how he really felt about me. This explains everything, he said. This explains why you never fit in with this family, why you were always so different, why you could never be like Claire. In that moment, I realized that somewhere deep down, my dad had always known or suspected that I wasn't his biological child. And instead of loving me despite it, he'd resented me for it. All those years of preferring Claire, of dismissing my feelings, of making me feel like I wasn't good enough, it all made sense now. Claire, who had been quiet during this whole revelation, finally spoke up. So you can't donate your kidney anyway, she said. Great, just great. Even facing her own mortality, even learning that her whole family structure was built on a lie, Claire's first concern was still how this affected her. I looked around at these people who I'd called family for 28 years, and I realized I felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I understood why I'd never fit in, why I'd always felt like an outsider, why nothing I did was ever good enough for Robert. I wasn't his daughter. I didn't belong to this family that had treated me like a second-class citizen my entire life. And you know what? That was actually liberating. I told them I needed time to process all of this information, and I left. I didn't know if I wanted to find my biological father or if I even wanted to maintain a relationship with my mom after she'd lied to me for my entire life. Over the next few weeks, I did a lot of soul-searching. I talked to a therapist about how to process this massive life change. I had to completely re-examine my understanding of myself and my place in the world. My mom kept calling, begging me to forgive her, saying she'd only lied to protect the family. Robert, I couldn't think of him as my dad anymore, didn't call at all. Claire was too focused on her own medical crisis to reach out to me. Eventually, I decided I did want to know about my biological father. My mom reluctantly gave me his name and last known contact information. It took some detective work, but I eventually found him living about 3 states away. He was married with 2 kids, working as an engineer, and had no idea I existed. I wrote him a letter explaining the situation and asking if he'd be willing to talk to me. A few days later, he called me, completely shocked but eager to learn about the daughter he'd never known he had. We arranged to meet, and it was honestly one of the best days of my life. My biological father, Michael, was kind, intelligent, and genuinely excited to meet me. He looked at photos of me growing up and pointed out all the ways I resembled him and his side of the family. For the first time in my life, I understood where my features came from, why I had certain personality traits, why I'd always felt different. Michael told me that he'd always wondered what happened to my mom after they lost touch, and that he was thrilled to discover he had another daughter. He introduced me to my half-siblings, who welcomed me with open arms. His wife was incredibly gracious about the whole situation and made me feel like part of their family from day one. Meanwhile, Claire's medical situation was getting worse. The family was frantically trying to find another donor, but no one else was a match either. My mom kept calling, begging me to ask Michael if he'd consider getting tested, which I refused to do. This wasn't his responsibility. About 2 months later, Claire finally found a donor through the National Registry. She got her transplant and made a full recovery. Throughout her entire recovery process, she never once thanked me for going through the testing process, never acknowledged what the family had put me through, never apologized for our childhood. The whole experience taught me something important about family. The people who raised me had treated me like I didn't belong, had dismissed my feelings, had prioritized Claire over me for my entire life. But Michael and his family welcomed me immediately and unconditionally, despite having no obligation to do so. I realized that biology doesn't make a family, but neither does just living in the same house and sharing a last name. Real family is made up of people who love you, support you, and treat you with respect and kindness. I've maintained a relationship with my mom, though it's complicated and will probably always be strained because of the lies. I have no contact with Robert, who made it clear that learning I wasn't his biological daughter was actually a relief for him. And Claire, well, she's alive and healthy, and that's all I ever wanted for her, despite everything. But I've built a wonderful relationship with Michael and my half-siblings. I finally understand why I love science and engineering, why I have certain mannerisms, why I approach problems the way I do. I have a family that actually appreciates who I am instead of wishing I was someone else. The irony is that if my family hadn't pressured me to get tested as a kidney donor, I might never have learned the truth about my parentage. Their attempt to guilt me into saving Claire ended up giving me the greatest gift of my adult life: the truth about who I really am and a connection to family members who actually value me. Looking back, I can see that there were signs all along. The way I never quite fit in, the way Robert treated me differently, the way Claire seemed to instinctively know I was different. But sometimes the truth is so big and life-changing that we can't see it until circumstances force it into the light. I don't regret going through the testing process, even though it was emotionally brutal at the time. It led me to my real family and gave me the closure I needed to understand my childhood. Sometimes the worst situations in our lives end up being the catalyst for the best changes. Claire got her kidney and her life back. I got something even more valuable. I got my real family and the truth about who I am. And honestly, I think I got the better deal.